you had said, Tom, that Angels and Airwaves, and this is one of your quotes, was an art project that approached larger human themes and tackled them in different mediums, or was simply a multimedia project. I mean, that's a wonderful idea and a very lofty vision. I mean, sometimes going into something with kind of grand, visions can sometimes, maybe fall short or maybe get forced into corners. I mean, so how do you take that theory and that idea and kind of, really make it work within the?
Um,
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I've always had this feeling that if I at least shoot for the stars and I don't get there, but I land on the moon, at least I've kind of left where everybody else is.
I see.
I think if you have large ambitions, and even if you don't reach them, you're usually going to end up a little bit higher than most. But I've always been an ambitious guy. I've always done what I said I was going to do. My schedules are usually a bit behind. But yeah, you're right. It can fall short very easily. But one of the strengths of the way this is working is that I've had to go over the past 10 years and create my own infrastructure to do a few different things. I mean, in the beginning, we were on a label, and a multimedia or transmedia project can't live on a record label or a film studio. They have interest of doing just specific things.
Right.
So first thing we had to do is build a software system. We did that. It was called ModLife, and the software system allowed us to sell movies and music and physical products directly to our fans. That software system actually went on to powers Pearl Jam's 10 Club, Kanye's releases, Nine Inch Nails releases, and merch stores. And so that software was dreamed up by Angels and Airwaves, and still going to this day. But once we got that, then we got off the labels, and then we put out a feature film, and we're like, okay, how do we do this, and how do we understand how to have a business? And then we learned a lot on that last record, Love, and that movie, Love. And then we got our staff, and we got our business model. And now I was able to, and this is the answer to the question, is wrangle in all these artists that are at the top of their game. So we have a New York Times best-selling author writing the book. I have Star Wars concept artists doing all the concept art for the entire world of Poet Anderson. I have award-winning animators from Europe, illustrators and comic book artists, and all these different people. So it's not all just me. And so I think this is really where I stand apart from most people that have big visions, is that I actually understand business, have built businesses, have failed at doing that and won a few times, and I'm able to be completely independent and create an ecosystem where all these artists can come together and do their best work. And it's not all on my shoulders. I'm not the one writing the novel alone. I'm not the one. I'm co-writing the novels. I'm co-writing the screenplays. I co-writing the music. But it's not all on me. But I get to be inspired and produce all these guys and inspire these guys. So I'm hoping that's how I'm going to end up in a good place.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, that is so cool. I mean, for you, Tom, obviously there's themes, like we said, themes and concepts running through all the A&A records. I know that Poet Anderson is kind of the one of the main guys in the new the Dreamwalker record. I mean, does the concept come and then the music gets written around it? I mean, are there you have some riffs flying around, or maybe a lyric idea, and that will suggest a character or a theme? I mean, how did this new album come together? I mean, was it first the theme and then the music, or was it the music and the theme, or just?
It's a little bit of all of that. Primarily there's themes that I'm very interested in as a person. I'm interested in dreams. I'm interested in ufology, cosmology. I'm time. I physics. All these large themes that have to do with why we're here, what we're here for, what we're doing. So those are always circling in my head. But on Poet Anderson, because it was such an ambitious mainstream approach, we're doing the largest stuff that we've ever done.
Yeah.
The musical choice to make a left turn and to grow dramatically, evolve dramatically, but also really change it up. Really change up what people think we're capable of or what we're all about. That all happened pretty largely in tandem with dreaming up the world of Poet Anderson. About 15 years ago, I came up with the character. Over the past 4 years, I came up with the world, and over the past 2 years, we started kind of, chiseling it out of stone, making it happen. But it definitely is a process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, are you? Are part of you in Poet Anderson? I mean, I'm sure you must be.
Sorry, say that again.
I'm sorry, Tom. I mean, certainly you are part of this Poet Anderson character. I mean, you must.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's a lot of me in him. That's like, started out with the really long bangs that I used to run back in the day. Put him in some tight jeans. I'm a punk rock kid that feels pretty alone on the inside, but he can he loves people and he can blend into any situation. But is capable of a lot more, and he's underestimated. And he's a dreamer. And in the story he's a lucid dreamer, but as a person, he can think big and attain kind of those potential that potential. And it's synonymous with myself in the respect where I've always been a dreamer. I've always identified a path to end up to a place that I wanted to be. And that's all I've done. And you get torn apart as you do that, and you put yourself out there, and you're never quite as good as you think you might be able to be, but at least you're trying, and that's kind of how I am. I'm trying really hard to do something that really moves people, but I completely know that I'm not the best. I'm a mediocre musician at best. I'm not like a great writer, but I'm not a great painter, but I kind of understand a little bit about. I'm one of those things where I'm a jack of all trades but a master at none. I think that's probably the best way to describe myself. So I look at Poet, he's got some qualities probably that I wish I had, but it's a reflection of myself for sure,
It is so interesting to hear you say that, because you said the same thing to me in our previous conversation. You had said, I've always been a guy when all the other guitar players were trying to learn how to do complicated leads and solos and whatever. I was always interested in writing songs. I never progressed to become the best guitar player, and I never became the best singer, but I can do them both decently well, and that's gotten me a lot further. I mean, it's such a, I talk to a lot of musicians, and you rarely hear them. I mean, a lot of them can be a little, maybe modest, but it tends to be kind of false modesty sometimes. With you, I mean, I truly believe you believe that, which is such an extraordinary thing, because you have had such remarkable success, and you've put together this infrastructure that, it's just pretty amazing. I mean,
well, I appreciate you recognizing that. I am being genuine with you. I know my limits. I think artists get a lot further when they know what they're not good at, and they know what they can do, and they know in the appropriate ways how to challenge themselves. Artists that think they're really good feel they can't grow. They get more bitter that they're not somewhere, they get more pissed that they're not getting recognized for how much they shred on the guitar.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter, because this is the biggest issue with art that musicians particularly don't understand. It's that art is not technique. Art is not a skill set. Art is evoking a feeling out of somebody. So what you do with your instrument, or what you do with your paintbrush, all it has to do is capture the attention and the imagination of somebody else walking by.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why Andy Warhol is one of the greatest artists of all time, and all he did was put a fucking Campbell soup can on a canvas.
Yeah.
Because at the time, it was interesting and relevant to the culture. And people forget that. Half of the art has nothing to do with the art itself. It's about communicating to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't know that, and musicians miss that. And that's the issue. That's what they hopefully will learn throughout their career, that they need to not be looking at what they're creating, but they have to be looking at how what they created is talking to somebody, and then they'll be in a better situation.
Really interesting, Tom. Tom, the new record, and I'm trying to understand, is it just you and Elon in there doing all the music, or was the band in there with you? Could you fill me in on what happened with that?
Yeah, I've always written all the records myself, and that's just kind of how the band was set up. The other guys would play their parts or whatever, but it was largely just me in there 99% of the time. And I worked with Critter, my kind of co-pilot. Critter passed away, and this was a great time when the company was getting set up and everything was going on to make this big musical change. I met Alon, and he was the most incredible multi-instrumentalist I've ever met in my life. He's the best piano player I've ever seen in my life. I mean,
Wow.
he can play Beethoven left-handed, blindfolded, Mach 5. You know, like he's infinitely better on guitar than I am. I mean, he sits there and shreds all day long, and everyone knows him because he's an incredible drummer. He plays for Nine Inch Nails, and Trent doesn't pick shitty people. So here's a guy that could do everything. So so this is a great time to bring in a writing partner, and here's a guy that can do all these things that I'm not capable of. Here's a guy that's polar opposite of me, and here's a guy that I'm probably going to argue with for a year, but once we figure it out, it's going to be pretty magical. And what you're hearing on the record is literally the negotiation of 2 years of two guys that don't like anything that's the same, but we barely figured it out, and we were so stoked. We're like, oh my God, this is just the beginning. Wait till the next record. Now we know how to work with each other. And so it doesn't mean the other guys aren't in the band. What it means is that the art itself is not just me anymore. It's Alon and myself. When we tour and when we figure out how to bring all this stuff to life, that's going to be, okay, bring back in Eddie, bring back in Dave, or David, and see how that works. It's hard for them because they got to kind of wait around and work at our schedules. I mean, Alon's not out with Nine Inch Nails, or I'm not out with Blink, or whatever. It's just been a tough situation for everybody. But since the beginning, it was about the entirety of all these pieces, not just about the band. So people kind of knew what they were getting into.
Interesting. So Alon, like you said, comes from a totally different musical place than you do.
Oh my God. So Alon hates everything. He hates fucking everything. He likes 5 bands. If you look at his iPod, there's probably 5 bands, but out of those 5 bands, every one of their records and probably the manuals of how to build those guys' houses, and he's like so deep on each one of those bands, he could perform every single part of every single instrument. And it would be Zeppelin, the Beatles, Queen, Fleece, and I think there'd be a competition for the last slot from Depeche Mode and Radiohead or something, you know. And he learns everything, and he will stay up all night, you know, creating his own analog synth tones out of the oscillators and filters that that are by hand. On this record, we do the same thing. There's no normal synthesizers. He's fashioning his own stuff. But with me, you know, I just throw a bunch of paint on the canvas and go, "That's fucking cool." You know, I'm a feeling guy. I'm not a technique guy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's completely different. So but I grew up on punk rock. We were like suspicious of guys that can play music really well. You know, we were about evoking a feeling. We were about rebelling against people that were all like better off than us. You know. And then here comes Alon. That's one of those guys that are like really fucking good at it. So trying to get us to work together was dope because it really brought in incredible technique with incredible wealth of emotion, which is what I'm about, you know. So I think we found a great pairing, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely, which is what you were talking about earlier about, you know, music is not about the technique. So obviously you needed a guy, you know, Elon obviously can play, but like you said, he brings a lot of emotion to what he plays, and it's not just all chops, and you know, that wouldn't have worked for you.
It wouldn't have worked for me if he was pure, if he was like a cold-hearted criminal. You know, I think, but in my mind, it's that yin and yang where somebody who can, you know, bring the chops and I can bring the emotion, but he can definitely digest it. And it was a learning. We both absorbed each other. You know, I'm writing songs different now because I realized how bored I am of myself. You know, so it's interesting where I've ended up this year. That's for sure.
So Elon was part of the project while you were writing the songs, meaning in a sense. So then like you said, so then maybe you would write stuff, or you'd go somewhere harmonically or something, catering to.
Usually how it worked is I would start some type of an architecture for a song with a riff or a pattern of something, and then he would take that and replay it And then I would sit there and say, God, I don't like that at all. It's like prog rock. What are you doing? And then I would take it, simplify it, and then he would say, oh, I see what you're doing. And then I'd say, oh, shit, I'd hand it back to him, and I'd go, fuck, I like that. Do that, but don't do that. And then after like 5 or 6 times, the analogy is I push the boat off the dock. We both fight over the steering wheel. And then once we get to the end of the ocean, he pulls it into port, you know? And that's exactly what we ended up doing with each other, and it was awesome.
That is so cool. So, I mean, one of the first songs we hear from the new record, Tom, is "Paralyzed," which is just an amazing song, and kind of that fuzz bass that opens that thing is so cool. And then the band comes in, and it's just this wonderful arrangement, these cool little guitar tones. I mean, does a song like "Paralyzed," Tom, connect back to a song like "Ghost on the Dance Floor"? I mean, is there a connecting tissue there at all, or is this something completely different?
I think people, like, I saw some of the comments where people were going, okay, hey, here, some of this sounds like what's on Ghost on the Dance Floor and this and that. For me, it's like I look at music and I kind of go, well, this section needs this type of thing. You know, it's like it's the way you look at song pieces. It's like you need to ring out a power chord, or you need to strum on some power chords, you need to do a riff, or you need to do like a muted riff, or there's like all these things that kind of stereotype and categorize types of riffs, and they become vernacular in the studio. On Paralyzed, there deep in the background, it had to be something that was rhythmic and skipping on 2 notes that fit with what I was singing. That's all it was. And it ended up being similar to a lead on a Blink song that it's just kind of one of those things where, yeah, 15 records later that I've created, there might be a little part here and there.
Yeah.
That's what I do, whatever. Not a big deal. You know, it's funny, in the punk rock scene, everything sounds the same. Kind of going, oh my God, I'm on different planets here. I'm so unique and diverse, compared to where I grew up in. But to the mass market, they don't see it that way. So.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in fact, back when we spoke, Tom, you had said to me, there are things that will never change, like my melodic sensibility and the way that I write. But the song structures, arrangements, chord progressions, and tonalities have all changed radically, which is kind of what you've sort of just described. I mean, certainly we can recognize that this is kind of Tom DeLonge, playing and writing and singing, but it's still different. I mean, it doesn't sound like Blink, and I didn't mean to make it sound like it sounded like a Blink record. I just just wondering if there was
I get it. No, you're completely correct, and I love the conversation.
Oh, that's so cool. That's cool. Tom, you'd also told me that, and this is something you said to me, I always tell people Angels Airwaves is Boxcar Racer. I mean, is that still true on this new record?
Yeah, absolutely. Even more so. I think this record sounds more like Boxcar than anything I've done since then. It's got it's got this angst and rawness to it. We brought it down to earth. One of the things I wanted to do was really not have this big, overly produced atmospheric record. We kind of beat that horse to the ground, and with this I wanted to do something that kind of just grounded the band, put it in the garage, and made it more approachable. And that's what Boxcar Racer did for me, at least for when we made that record. So I think people would hear a lot of those kind of similarities on this record.
Interesting. The Wolfpack was another amazing song. Kind of a little bit more of a kind of a keyboard sequencer thing going on in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things I think later on this year we're going to release an EP of alternate versions of these songs. A lot of these songs, like the Wolfpack, we have like 4 completely different versions of it. The first riff on Sense I wrote, and it's to hear Alon took it and added soul. And one of the things that makes him such a deadly artist is that he's such a phenomenal drummer. So when you take his ability for rhythm and pattern from the drums and put it on synthesizer or piano, play like a master. It's like he could do any. I can't do the things with my hands that he can do. And so that riff on Wolfpack is basically an example of that, where he took something very simple that I started that I thought would be a cool direction and made it have a soul. And I just think it's a really great departure from what we've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Tunnels is the first song you wrote for Dreamwalker, which is just another amazing song. Elon's playing that great kind of a, I don't know what that is, that kind of four on the floor bass drum riff and the clean guitars, and I think there's some sequence keyboards in there. I mean, when you kind of had that song, Tom, I mean, did it kind of say, hey, this is cool. This could be like the cornerstone of what I'm looking for. This is a place to kind of jump off from.
Yeah, it's the first song we wrote. I love that you just called it a cornerstone and a jumping off point. That's exactly what it was.
Cool.
When we did that, that was before we had any arguments, before we had any question anything that we did. We were like, fuck, we were really proud of it early on. We were referencing, the background vocals that are saying, dream a bit, these kind of, it reminded me of Motown. The four on the floor was kind of bluegrassy. But the lyrics were kind of, reminded me of Joshua Tree era stuff.
Oh, I see.
And so it had all these elements that were different for Angels, but spiritual, reminded me of what Angels needs to be doing. It was just a really great jumping off point. And, but to hear the way Alon played bass on that, just had all the soul, it's just fucking awesome. I'm really proud of that song. Also because I wrote it, the lyrically, it really was special to me because it referenced something that happened to me as my father died this year. Middle of the night and feeling a presence rush through me, and then my phone rang that he just passed away. It was a very spiritual, paranormal moment, and it was insane. So I went back and wrote the end of the song, which was the song's about doubting religion. It's the end of the song saying, hey, religious or not, there's something else on the other side. And that to me was really an exciting and life-changing experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard about your father, and I am so sorry about that. I mean,
don't be. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I know what that feels like. It's interesting that you would describe it because I was listening to it and I read your comments about it having like this little Motown thing, and I'm thinking, well, God, to me that has like this very kind of a modern, it's almost like a U2 vibe, So to hear you describe it as Motown, but then you say, yeah, the four on the floor, more of that R&B thing. Now I'm understanding what you're saying, which is just so interesting.
Think of it. They call them Thomisms, where what I'm thinking of doesn't come out in the art itself. When I think of Motown, I think of all the backup singers who these little stabbed harmonies that come in and out. And
I see.
On Tunnels is going, dream of it, reminding me of background singers. But musically, I mean, what you get is when you get a punk rock guy kind of getting inspired by something from Motown, and you get four on the floor.
I gotcha.
Which is different, it's not exactly the crazy groove you're used to, but the complexities of those incredible players. But that's how we get to that point,
That is so interesting. And you talked before, Tom, about how you wanted this record not to, be kind of this grand epic thing, maybe like the last record was, maybe a little bit more organic. In terms of that, Aaron and Tom Lord and Algie mixed this thing. I know that Tom worked with you guys on. The Blink stuff, and Alan Mulder was in there doing his thing. I mean, what kind of thing do they bring to this? I mean, obviously the mix of a record is incredibly important. I mean, certainly, someone who kind of has his finger on all the different moving parts here, kind of knew what he wanted the record to sound like, and you felt like these guys could kind of bring it to you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was Aaron. I mean, bringing up Alan Mulder, a guy that I've never worked with, it was an awesome idea, and we sent him the Wolfpack and Tunnels, and I think he did a fantastic job. One of the things we wanted to do was maintain kind of a more purist approach to these songs in the sense of the tonalities of it. With Tom Lord Algie, he has a thing that he does that I've always really, really liked, and it's a much more epic kind of produced feeling, and we used him on a few of those songs. But even outside of Tom and Alan, I wanted to keep the songs true to the dream, which is kind of a pun, but what we wanted it to be. And so we had Aaron do it. I said, Aaron, we've been engineering all these songs to be a very specific way. It sounds different than Angels has ever sounded. It would be a shame to send it off to somebody that doesn't know all those things and all those reasons of why we're doing this.
Yeah.
I was very excited about Aaron jumping in and keeping them true to the spirit of what we intended it to be.
Interesting. I mean, in some ways, Tom, I mean, did Elon kind of, maybe push you a little bit more as a guitar player?
Oh my God! Half of our argument is me coming to terms with the fact that I'm repeating myself and I'm not challenging myself. Absolutely. Even vocally, Aaron was like, "Stop being so fucking lazy and show up to the studio and let's work." You know, and it was. You know, you surround yourself with people that you hate only because they're challenging you.
Yeah.
So it's because you know in your heart you're wrong. You know.
Interesting. But I mean, certainly though, I mean, if we really listen back, you tend to be a little self-deprecating about your own guitar playing, but I mean, even if we go back all the way to like the Cheshire Cat record and songs like M&M's and Wasting Time, and I mean, those rhythms and those things that you're playing, I mean, you are locked in. I mean, that stuff is obviously based on kind of that right hand rhythm stuff. So I mean, you always had that sensibility. I mean, whether it was the greatest playing in the world doesn't matter, but I mean, you were locked. I mean, you had the feel. So
I appreciate you saying that. I actually think I'm good at being me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So like, I never took a guitar lesson in my life. I figured out how to plug in the holes with riffs and rhythms because I was a single guitar player. We're a three-piece. I figured out how to vary within the simple architecture of what most punk rock songs are like. And I could play fucking fast, and doing riffing that's really fast is something a lot of guys can't do on guitar because they're used to sitting back and grooving and bobbing their head. And they do a lot of crazy, dope, soulful solos and all these things that are complex. But when you get them to try and go, okay, now play that, at 170 BPM, and like try and make it, it's not easy. And, but it's just two different skill sets. But truthfully, I wish I knew how to do both, and I'm getting there.
Interesting. Anomaly closes a record, kind of this acoustic guitar thing, and are those like steel drums on there?
It sounds like it. It's not. I think they were just some form of bongos, but the way they got treated.
I see.
God, I'd shoot myself if we went straight for the steel drums. But the song was interesting because it started out as a finger picking song. It sounded more like Blackbird than anything. And when we first started it, and we opted to change it into a strumming kind of pattern, and it works well. But I can't tell you which one I like more. And that would be another alternate worth releasing.
That's so cool. So you obviously dig this other side of it as well. There's more of the acoustic side, kind of the quieter side as opposed to kind of the bigger rocky things.
Yeah, I think we need to do it all. I mean, people, wait till people hear what we're doing later on this year musically.
Really?
They think they understand. Oh yeah, if they think they know what we're capable of, or if they think they know what we are, they're going to be sadly mistaken, and actually happily mistaken. Let me say that.
Interesting. When we spoke last time during the Love Part 2 record, you had told me, obviously you were talking about an earlier point. I didn't think Blink was ever getting back together, so I started Angels and Airwaves, and that became my life. I mean, has it sort of, kind of gone beyond where you ever thought it might? I mean, has it kind of...
I always dreamed we would get here. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. I always knew that if we just stuck with it, we would be able to put together something that's as ambitious as it is crazy. And my company, To the Stars, which Angels and Airwaves is a part of, which is a publisher and a record label and a film studio all in one, we're just getting started. We finally know the business model. We finally have the staff. We finally have, the elements all starting to roll out. We'll have 3 novels out this year.
Wow.
We'll have 3 pieces of music. We'll have licensing and merchandising all hitting the stores. We have the comic books coming out. We have 2 screenplays going into pre-production. It's crazy, So if all this stuff fires and works and does just okay, if it just does okay, this could be, a really, really big band.
Yeah.
But all these projects aren't from the band. The band is supporting the project. The movie is supporting the project. The book is supporting the project. So these aren't vanity projects. It's not like we're making a rock opera about our album. Our album is communicating the theme of lucid dreaming, and so will the novel, and so will the movie, and the property of Poet Anderson will live forever. Have many books, many movies. So that's kind of and then we're going to tackle a whole different theme, and you'll hear about that later on Christmas of next year. So
yeah.
We're excited. Got lots of stuff on the fire.
That is so cool. I mean, in some ways, Tom. I mean, did you ever think that I mean, had Blink kind of remained together, without the kind of the split in the middle there, that some of this music, might have been done by them? I mean, I mean, could Tunnels have been done by Blink or the Wolfpack? I mean,
I couldn't have, only because I couldn't have written those on by myself. Like, I think Blink could easily sound like that, but those songs are only possible because I'm sitting with a guy that grew up learning Zeppelin and Queen songs. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I didn't grow up learning that stuff, so I don't know how to grab a synthesizer, sequence it, and fuck around with the oscillations and filters and then play it with the drummer's hand, with a rhythmic left and right. I can't do that, so my stuff would sound dramatically more vanilla, which is cool too. I always said Blink was like nursery rhymes on steroids, and I loved that. I mean, I loved it. I was a big fan of this punk band called the Toy Dolls, where if you take the Descendants and the Toy Dolls as punk bands, and you can check them out later, that's exactly who Blink is. The Toy Dolls were a three-piece playing really fast, really catchy music, punkers out of England. The singer was little tiny dude with giant sunglasses, and you'd jump on his bass player's shoulders, and they'd run around in the mosh pit playing really fast leads, and all the songs were about elephants and drinking. And it was super awesome, right? And so I love that, and I still love that, and I still listen to that shit before I play a show, Angels or Blink. But these songs I could not have done without Alon. These are not things that flow out of me naturally. I would play a riff, and he's like, "Dude, that shit sounds like Def Leppard. What are you playing?" I'm like, "Wait, what?" And he would take the guitar and turn it into something else, and I was, "Yeah, okay, got it." So it's not that Blink wouldn't sound like this, couldn't, but I physically could not have written these songs by myself.
Interesting, and sort of reversing that, Tom. I mean, when you're in there with Elon or doing something, I mean, would you ever think, well, Blink might have done it this way, or Mark might have interpreted, Elon's bass part this way, or Travis would have played the part this way, and let me take that and turn that around with Angels. I mean, does that thinking ever happen with you?
Yeah, I mean, with Blink, it's cool to have two projects where one, we have this big legacy and we're trying to protect it, and the other one, we have no legacy and we're trying to create it. So, in Blink, in the Blink world, we might, take a deep breath before we go too far out on a limb. The things that appeal to all three of us, the negotiation between the three of us, it ends up in a different place. With Angels and Airwaves, the negotiations are completely different.
I see.
We can what we're shooting for and things we're willing to try, and our influences are totally different. In Angels and Airwaves, we would listen to some old Beatles thing and just go, let's do something like that.
I see.
And in Blink, we might listen to the Beastie Boys and go, let's do something like that. It's different places, because if I said, let's do something like this with the Beatles and Blink, it might not totally resonate with the other guys. They love the Beatles. I mean, it's not that they don't love those bands, but I don't think that's what comes to mind of things to be inspired by when writing music necessarily. Because, in the Blink world, we got to think about different things. We got to think about, keeping the energy level up. We got to think about the rebellion and the angst that we had. We got to think about playing in front of 100,000 people and getting people to jump up and down.
Yeah. Interesting. So, Tom, I mean, along those lines, can you maybe fill me in on where Blink is at the moment? Maybe in terms of, getting back together, or maybe working on a record, or what that relationship is like.
We just found a partner to put the record out on. We just booked time in January to start writing it. We're going to try and do it a little bit different this time, where recreate scenarios when we did a self-titled record that was important for our kind of discography, and challenge ourselves to dream it all back up, but while all in the same room, which we didn't do last time. So I think it's going to be a good one.
So being in the same room is a huge part of who Blink is. I mean, I would imagine it'd be you got all three guys that would have to be in the same room playing together, right?
That's the goal here, and it's just hard because everyone lives in different locations.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna I'm excited. I think we're going to do a fantastic job. I think everyone's ready to write that record that redefines our career, so it needs to happen, which goes along with what we've been saying. I think there's going to be a lot of, risk taking and departures from what people know of us, but I think it'll still be within a world that provides some of the adjectives that our fans have always desired from the band.
That is so cool. And Angels is going to go out and tour?
Yes, I'm in the middle of starting to take some meetings on how best to present all of this, because we have to present our last feature film, animation, original content, narrations from novels, and just different forms of technology to make this thing an experience.
Wow.
It can be really, really cool if I can pull it all together. So it's just going to take me a minute.
That is so cool. And kind of a last question here, Tom. You talked about Tunnels as being, one of the special songs for you. I mean, if you had to maybe, pick a couple other songs that kind of really resonate for you, I mean, any songs come to mind?
Are you talking about Angels and Airwaves songs?
Either Angels or Blink songs.
Well, I mean, an Angels and Airwaves song, The Adventure, has been something that has gone a long way for us because it set people off with the right foot forward as far as understanding where we're coming from spiritually, I think. But for, from other bands, there's so many different songs. But, I mean, there's songs from The Cure, there's songs from U2. I think, this year, Bono, I was listening to a song where he wrote about his father passing away. Sometimes you can't make it on your own. It's a really good inspiration for me in this project, but also going through what I went through, and I think that's worthy of mentioning.
That is so cool. So everything else is good with you, and everything's working, and you're happy?
Yeah, I am. I appreciate you asking, and everything's good. I'm just excited to get these other pieces of the puzzle out, and I just hope. I don't expect people to go, oh my God, this guy changed art forever. I'm hoping that they go, this is cool. I'm glad someone's trying hard for us to be entertained and to think about stuff. That's what I'm shooting for. That
is so great. Tom, thank you so much. And again, my condolences about your father and your buddy there. I know that was kind of a tough year for you.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I know, right? My board.
Yeah, absolutely. So you take care of yourself and sing all the good notes, okay?
Thanks, bud.
Thanks, Tom.